palm of your hand.
What's going on, everybody? This is Gabe and Chase with the From Screen to Shelf podcast. We are missing our good friend Will today. He was busy with some work stuff, so Chase and I will be holding down the podcast today. And today we are going to be talking about a few things that kind of all influence each other. We're going to be talking about remakes. We're going to be talking about the shift towards international media and the international market. And how those two things kind of influence each other. We've seen a big shift lately, at least the past few years, where a lot of people are consuming international media. I've been personally watching a lot of movies like from Japan the past year. Chase, I think he's been watching a lot of like Italian horror films.
Yeah.
We've been just consuming a lot of different media that doesn't originate in the US, which has been an interesting kind of talking point that we've been discussing. So we thought we'd bring it to the podcast. And we also were talking about remakes and how remakes have just been kind of been, coming out nonstop lately. So we kind of want to talk about these things and kind of how they all influence each other. And I think Chase had an opening title that he kind of wanted to talk about in terms of remakes. And which title was that, Chase?
Yeah, and it's just because of the way that it evolves. But the one I wanted to bring up as a good remake and a warranted one is the two King Kong remakes, 3 King Kong films. I did want to ask you, have you ever seen the 1930s King Kong?
Yes, a while back.
Dude, it is a masterpiece. It is genuinely a masterpiece. The way that they did things, like it still holds up. Like I remember the first time I saw that when I was like 12, 13 years old. I was just absolutely amazed that they did what they did at that time, and even then when you compare other movies for what came out and stuff like that, like it's just a huge testament to its time, and it still stands the test of time. But that brings up my point. Then you get the 1970s King Kong. That is good, very good, but it's a warranted remake that came out about 40, 45 years later because technology advanced, the way that cinema was scaled, the way that it was done, And then another about 30 years later, then you have Peter Jackson's King Kong that comes out because CGI is huge, which he had been working on a King Kong remake, but the Lord of the Rings movies overtook it since the 90s. Fun fact. He was trying, because that was one of his favorite movies as a kid. So he approached the studios approached him mutually. And then they started collaborating on a King Kong movie that got shelved for a while. He was already making props and everything for the King Kong movie.
I didn't know he was that far along. I thought he was like conceptually in his mind that he wanted to do it.
No, yeah, he had already started making certain props based on like my research. Because after I finished Lord of the Rings, I went down a deep dive into the King Kong remake. Because I ended up rewatching it right after I finally, after years, finished the Lord of the Rings series. And so then I started diving into the 2005 Peter Jackson's King Kong, because that's one of my favorite movies ever, man. I love that movie.
I did not know that.
Dude, I love that movie, man. Yeah, like the fight scenes, the drama, the acting. I wouldn't call it a perfect movie, but it damn near is from front to back. It's one of those longer run times where it runs tight. It's never boring to me. Jack Black kills it. It's one of those things outside of his realm, so I love watching it for that fact alone. And again, that's where I'm getting with like remakes. Whenever you get something that's different, but true to the formula, true to what you have, a fan making a fan film, essentially. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like somebody that's a huge fan of it, has a lot of passion, wants to make a movie that they want to watch, right? So I feel like whenever you get a director like Peter Jackson that makes something that like he'd want to sit on the couch with his family and watch as well, and then something that he's going to want to look back at 20, 30, 40 years later and be like, I did that. You know what I mean? And still enjoy it. That's where it comes out absolutely amazing, especially when you're talking about a giant ape, and then computer graphics and animation and stuff like that has evolved so much, almost 80 years since the original. It's just something very, 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 very rewarding. You know what I mean? Especially like, this isn't a spoiler, everybody. I feel like if you haven't seen the Peter Jackson King Kong, there's just something wrong at that point. But the fight with the T-Rex, you know what I mean?
Oh, dude, I love that fight sequence.
Yeah, exactly, dude. There's just it's just peak to me, But those are warranted remakes that I feel like whenever as time evolves and technology evolves, those are bound to happen, right? But then you get some that aren't needed, like the 1970s Wicker Man versus the Nick Cage Wicker Man. Why did you need to remake that? You know what I mean? It's not like technology advanced that much for something to come out. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Now there's times where like you just kind of want to take the general idea. Like something I'm a huge believer in is I think the Purge series needs a remake. You know what I mean? Take the idea of it and actually do it justice, right? Some of them are good, but most of them are pretty forgettable because
They're
I
just
think it
rehashed
wastes
at
the
this point.
yeah, like they just don't I don't think they utilize their premise to the fullest ability. You know what I'm saying? Like I feel like it had somebody gets a hold of that premise and does it justice, that you could have something absolutely cult classic, instant classic even, right? Something that does really well at the box office, something that gets people to go to the theater, put themselves in the seat and then go from there. But otherwise, you just get so many that came out, especially during the bad era of specifically horror in the 2000s, that just were cash grabs, you know?
Yeah.
The remake of Texas Chainsaw, it's decent. It's not my favorite, but it's decent. Then you have the Rob Zombie Halloween remakes. Then you have the Friday the 13th remake, which I actually like. But you have so many things that are just trying to capitalize on something that really didn't need to be capitalized on. So that's kind of how I wanted us to open it up, because I wanted to open it up on a more positive note with positive remakes like King Kong, because those are things that are gonna happen, right?
Yeah.
Like Godzilla doesn't get that treatment. Like they don't remake. I guess -1 would be the closest thing to a remake of the original that we've ever had to Godzilla. You've had some like reboots to like revitalize the series, but I don't think that falls anywhere in the category of what we're talking about. So like getting something like King Kong that has actually remade the movie twice over at this point, 3 entries total. It's something that's warranted versus the things that we'll eventually talk about that are completely unwarranted, that didn't need to happen at all.
Yeah, I mean, I think like King Kong is a good example of like, and people sometimes use this term interchangeably, right? Like a reimagining, right? Like where you said King Kong is kind of this, it's this film where it, every few decades, it's a new time, it's a new era, it's a new way of like looking at movies, it's a new way that movies are actually developed and produced. Like, so it's reimagined every few decades, and it brings
Yeah.
something to that, like to that audience or to that decade, right? And I kind of like, I was even thinking about, I mean, in a way, kind of like, so like superhero movies had kind of done that too. Kind of like, you have your 80s Batman or whatever, and then you do, like Nolan's trilogy, or you do the Batman that just came out now. And it's kind of like this, every decade has kind of like a new reimagining, a reinterpretation of that movie. And I think
Yeah.
those can be warranted. I think that the movies that you're talking about, where it's just kind of like, I'm just going to remake this movie just because it was really good, right? And it's a good plot, and it's something that may intrigue people. I don't think those are warranted. I'm thinking of kind of, you and I were talking about it before we started recording. You had never heard there was an Old Boy
Yeah.
remake,
Remake.
right? With
Yeah.
Josh Brolin. And
Yep.
to me, that's like kind of like, you already have this movie that's like, I mean, I think Old Boy was like 2003 or something like that. I don't remember the exact
Yeah.
year, but it was early 2000s. And it's already well done. Like you said, there's nothing else that you could really add to it or reimagine to it. Um, so why make it? Why make a remake of that movie? Because at that point, you're taking something that's like really special and really unique, and you can't replicate that. So
Yeah.
I think it really boils down to, it's like, do you have a property or a film that it, something that you could reimagine versus just remake? And I know
Yeah.
people use those terms interchangeably, but like 2001, you can't
Never.
remake 2001. You know what I mean? It's like its
Yeah.
own experience. But if you take something like King Kong or something like Batman or something, I mean, they're talking about trying to do, I think recently, like Harry Potter, which is like
Yeah.
another one, which like
There's no
that
need.
just came out like 10 years ago, man. Like
Yeah.
it's kind of
Yeah.
crazy. And it
Yeah.
that's when you can tell that it's not creativity and ingenuity. It's just like trying to make money. And I
Yeah.
think that's where a lot of remakes also just like, that's where they fall flat. It's like, is there kind of like what you said with like Peter Jackson, where someone's just really passionate about, King Kong, and it's just trying to reinterpret or reimagine it for this generation versus, Old Boy made a lot of money. Let's make a remake, with Josh Brolin and
Yeah.
see how it does. And that's a problem. And I think over time, there have been some good remakes. You know what I mean? I think we are talking about The Ring too, right? So,
Yeah.
you have a Ringu that was made in Japan. I think it was like 98 or something like that. And then
Yep.
the Ring came out, I think, was it 2002?
Yeah.
I don't
2002,
remember.
2003.
Which to
Yeah.
me, I mean, The Ring was pretty solid. Like I thought The
Yeah.
Ring it was a pretty solid movie. But you really have to take care in trying to make something like that. You know what I mean? Where it's like you have a source material for something that just came out 5 years ago, and it's like, how can I kind of make it unique or more applicable to the culture or the time or era that I'm trying to do now. So I mean, remakes can work. We're not trying to like shit on remakes, so to speak,
Yeah.
but it's very difficult for them to work if it's not an actual, like you said, multi-generational reimagining.
Yeah.
It's scary to watch, man. And the Ring was actually a solid movie in my opinion, and I
Yeah.
really like Ringu a lot. So but I think over time, I think the past 2 decades we've just been hammered down with so many bad remakes, like remake
Yeah.
after remake after remake. And you had an interesting theory that I kind of want to bring up. You had said, so we've been hammered down with all these bad remakes, and then and kind of transitioning into the kind of the international market that we were just talking about. You said like in 2019 Parasite came out, and then you said
Yeah.
you noticed like a major shift. What was the major shift that you saw?
The major shift that I saw for the most part was like, I mean, I just remember the biggest word of mouth is nobody really knew what Parasite was. Like a really good, how do you say this? A really good way of saying it is like Godzilla -1, right? If a lot more people had a lot more mainstream appeal, like it's doing really, really well, but it's not doing 500 million, a billion, like a superhero movie or a Steven Spielberg flick or a Martin Scorsese movie. You know what I mean? Like those are guaranteed to generate a lot of money depending on how it's produced and released, i.e., like Killers of the Flower Moon. Everybody knows that's coming out on streaming, so they might wait till it comes out at home, right?
Yeah.
So the biggest thing is a lot of people checked out Parasite because they're like, how, best picture, this and that. What is that movie, right? So the biggest thing whenever it comes to that is I just feel like it's started to get a lot of attention, like before we deep dive into that too much, because like the biggest thing whenever it comes to certain types of remakes, right? Because it definitely is all intertwining in the way that it happens. Because you still have some really, really good ones, right? Like David Cronenberg's The Fly with Jeff Goldblum, John Carpenter's The Thing, which is a remake.
Forgot about The Fly. Holy crap!
Yeah,
I forgot.
yeah,
And that's a remake.
yeah. And then you have like I would call spiritual remakes, like The Mummy with Brendan Fraser, right? Which I mean, you have The Mummy with Boris Karloff from like the 30s, 40s, but it's completely different, right?
I would say that's like a reimagining for like that new generation, right? It's like, and
Exactly.
it's not even like the same tone really as the
Yeah.
original. Like it's a completely different, just reinterpretation of it.
Yeah, and then like I'm sure you saw this movie because it was the talk of the town, True Grit, with Jeff Bridges
Oh
and Matt
yeah.
Damon.
Oh dude, I love that man. That was Coen Brothers, right?
Yep, directed by the Coen brothers.
That's a remake too. Holy shit, I forgot about that.
Yeah, exactly. And then you have some more polarizing ones, and that's where I'm getting like, and then It's okay. There's another good way, you know what I mean? Because you had that one that was made for TV. That's just like it's 2 parts, one movie whenever you buy it on a Blu-ray, but then it came out in 2 parts. I think that's a warranted remake. It's based off a novel. You can have more like direct interpretation of it, right? Then you have some like some absolutely freaking soulless ones. Like one of my, if you tuned into our Christmas episode, we talked about some of our favorite Christmas movies, and I shouted out Black Christmas. The movie's been remade twice. I actually do like the 2006 remake. It's not up there with the original, but it's decent, and it's actually gotten a little bit of a cult status as time has gone on. Then you have that absolutely soulless one that doesn't even need to be given 5 seconds of fame from 2019. That one's awful. You know what I mean? It just takes like it didn't need to be called Black Christmas. It didn't. It could have been called so many other things other than that. So it just became more or less of a cash grab, right? But then I feel like you have good ways of doing it, like we've mentioned before, and we're not going to go too much on these 2 titles I'm about to mention, but there's better ways of doing it without really pissing people off. Instead of remaking an original, like whenever it comes to David Gordon Green's Halloween series or trilogy, just continue after that, have your own story without really retconning much. Just have different timelines,
Yeah.
Exorcist Believer, like everybody knows how we feel about that movie.
Requels.
Yeah, you know what I mean? And then you have great ways of doing it, like Scream 5. You know what I mean? Like I know some people don't like it that much after 6 came out. I don't see the problem with 5 at all. Six, very good. It took
Mhm.
the franchise in a completely different direction. But yeah, and then that intertwines with what you're talking about with like, because then you had a lot of movies, and I can't name a lot of them off because I'm more like you were mentioned earlier, like I'm more into giallo whenever it comes to like foreign international releases.
Mhm.
Italian horror, it was just done differently. It's just a whole different breed of movies out there.
Yeah.
So then once you start getting like the market overly saturated, I believe there was another one called One Missed Call, I think was sort of based off of a Japanese movie. If you remember that one where like they get a
It sounds
call,
familiar. I don't remember it off the top of my head.
it's almost exactly like the premise of Ring, where like they watch it and they have a ticking time bomb,
Mhm.
after they watch that tape or get a hold of it. It's like after you get the call, you have a ticking time bomb on you. You know what I mean? So like the person's trying to subvert the call. So you got a lot of that. And I think they found a lot of success with Ring. And since horror movies are so lower budget and how do you say it, so easy to produce, you can
Yeah.
make them in 5 to 6 weeks,
Mhm.
almost maximum at that point. So then you start getting into like the more modern times where after you do that for 10, 15 years, 10, 15 years at one point was you could do so much in that time frame, right? But now we're at a point where like look what happened with Marvel and kind of their reputation over like the last year and a half, 2 years. They
Mhm.
spent 10 years building up a phase and a saga just for it to really get diminished rather quickly. And
Yeah.
that same thing can happen whenever you're oversaturated with reboot, requels, sequels, this and that, rather than original IPs. And I think that's why a lot of people are gravitating, which is why I wanted to go on that tangent real quick, to international films and distributors like A24. You know
Mhm.
what I mean? Because A24 does so much original content, like whether they're massive box office successes or not, they always get this almost cult like second win. A lot of their releases
Yeah.
do. Like, I think we had mentioned it. It might have been on air or off air at one point, but Inside the Zone or Zone of the Insider about the
Mhm.
concentration camp. It's not showing anywhere, but I've been seeing a lot of advertisements for it. It's getting a huge second win, but it came out almost a month and a half ago at this point. And so like things like that are super rewarding. And then whenever you get things like Godzilla -1, I know we bring that up all the time. Had you taken Godzilla out, replaced it with any kaiju, anything like this, anything like that, it still would have been a damn near masterpiece. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like it's a familiar name. It put butts in seats. It got people going, and it's doing very well. And I'm so happy for it. And then to intertwine with Parasite, a lot of people got like an original story like that, had so much going for it. It was very engaging, very emotional, very rewarding. And I think at a time whenever that movie was coming out, that's not to say that there's nothing out there. But
Mhm.
what a lot of the mainstream Hollywood gets fed to us, right? All of those flicks, the things that you see a lot more bigger advertisement budget that is constantly playing on like YouTube ads, TV, cable ads, stuff like that. It waters a lot down, right? So then you want to go seek other things. Like one of my favorite South Korean watches after Parasite was The Villainous. Shout out The Villainous. A lot of people are
Yeah, you
aware of
told
that
me about
movie.
that one.
It's so good, man, and it directly inspired the motorcycle chase scene. Like in the behind the scenes extras on the disc,
Mhm.
they name dropped The Villainous as the direct inspiration for that movie or parts of that movie.
That's
It's
dope.
done that well, you know what I mean? So I just find it so rewarding that places are getting like all of this little international appeal when it comes to reboots, remakes, sequels, stuff like that, because you can't, there's original content. Like one of the phrases I despise is when there's no good movies. Dude, you just aren't looking. That is
Yeah,
just,
you're looking in the
what I
wrong
mean.
place at that point.
Yeah, there's so much good movies, man. Like there really is. That's like saying like modern music is trash. No, just what you happen to be listening to, you just need to go and find it. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
It's the problem is, and you brought this up beforehand. It's this kind of the as soon as you kind of get the corporate kind of involvement, right, or the corporate integration with it, where it's just like
Yeah.
pumping out movies to get the numbers up. Kind of, you had brought up Disney as well, Marvel, like the live action remakes like Cinderella and Lion
Yeah.
King and all that stuff. Like you're just pumping out content that we've already seen multiple times, right?
Mhm.
And at that point there's no kind of creative ingenuity. Like it's just you're literally just trying to make a profit. And I think a lot of these international markets, whether it's Italy or South Korea or Japan or wherever, it, I think the studios there, you know, they're operating under a different framework than our traditional kind of
Yep.
Hollywood framework, right? Where it's like Hollywood, it's about crunch time and making money, and over there, it's really, I think they're in this kind of awesome phase where it's like they can explore, right? And they can try new
Hmm.
things, and they can take their time making really good movies, right? And they can kind of, I think, you know, bringing up Godzilla minus one again, like they can take a budget and squeeze the hell out of it, right? And produce something that's like phenomenal. And we just don't have that here. And I think honestly, the international markets right now are probably benefiting from kind of this, you know, this fatigue that we have of just watching the same crap here over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And you and I have seen, at least on the Reddit and Discord, where I mean, people are bringing up foreign movies all the time.
Hmm.
Um, I've recently been watching like a lot of, you and I have been talking about Japanese horror movies. That's all I've been watching like the past like month and a half. I've been watching Dark Water, a lot of kind of the I was watching a lot of Kurosawa movies as well.
Yeah.
High and Low, Ikuru, Stray Dog, just really good movies. Like you said, it's just you need to know where to look for these movies. It's like if
Yeah.
you're just watching a lot of the mainstream Hollywood movies, you're not going to get anything that's kind of rewarding. You're just going to
Yep.
get the same old, the same formula, and you're going to get tired of it.
Yeah.
And right now, I think at least a lot of moviegoers, from what we've seen, it's kind of this big shift into kind of international media. And
Hmm.
even, I mean, even if we want to bring it to physical media, I mean, a lot of physical media too has just been a lot of like cult international movies
Yeah.
that, you know, that are like 20 years old, and then they're getting kind of this, you know, this big release again, and it's exciting to see, dude. It's something that's different, and I think kind of what you said was spot on. When Parasite came out, that really, I think, shifted everyone's mind frame towards like, wow, this is a really good movie. This came from South Korea. Let's watch more South Korean content.
Yep.
And I think, you know, with like Squid Games the past few years, and a lot of even just a television series as well. There's another one I was watching, Alice in Borderland. I don't know if you've seen that or not. Kind of like Squid Games, but it's I think it's a Japanese or South Korean show. And dude, it's just so original. It's just so unique, and it's like so
Yeah.
engaging. And you just don't get that with kind of mainstream Hollywood with the framework we're working under right now, at least.
Yeah.
So
No, I agree. Yeah.
I mean, what do you think is going on? At least since we're all kind of shifting towards like A24 and international movies and everything like that, what do you see happening with the climate here now, though? Because I mean, if we're gonna keep doing what we've been doing with the way Hollywood's been releasing these films, I mean, what do you see happening here?
Yeah, I mean, it just really depends. Like, that goes back to like with what we were talking about with I think it was our state of cinema. It might have been even in our state of physical media episode where we kind of prefaced and talked about like people just don't want to go out. You know what I mean? And not everybody, right? Not going to put everybody in a box, but a lot of people are more inclined to be able to sit at home, do this, do that, be able to pause it, take their bathroom breaks. So I think what it's coming down to, like, physical media over the last few months has been getting a massive second wind, because once you start adding up HBO Max, once you start adding up the extra $20 for Netflix, this and that, right? People just would rather pay the $20 if they're only watching a handful of movies, because not a lot of people watch multiple movies a week like we do. You know
Mhm,
what I mean? Some people are 1-2 movies a month type of people, if that at all. I know people that
mhm,
don't watch movies at all. But I think the biggest shift has just been like, it's going to be what is original, what looks different, and what is ultimately, how do you say this, going to be the most rewarding experience based off of initial first impressions off the trailer, right?
mhm,
Like, as of the time that this drops, our ISS review should be out. Like, that's something that should go out there and get people going for an original concept, something that's good, something that's different, a nice script. It's not perfect by any means, but the more you go and support smaller indie projects like that, the more you're going to get. But now that I think that over the last 365 days or so, that bigger budget Marvel movies and Disney movies and stuff like that have been tanking more so than less, I'm hoping that they start listening, right? You have Poor Things, which was pretty critically acclaimed at all these awards that have been going on lately, right?
yeah,
with Emma Watson and Willem Dafoe, which I definitely want to check out at this point. But it's an original concept. It's different. It falls more into that art house category more so than anything else. And I think it's Fox. I don't think it looks like an A24 movie, but it's
I
not.
don't know who did it, and it's actually based off of a novel, which I didn't know either. So I guess it's
Oh, really?
yeah, it's based off of a novel. But like what you said, it's still kind of just original in the sense like you don't see something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you watch the trailer for it. Have you seen the trailer for it? Because I know you stay away from trailers quite a bit.
I actually, I think it pre-rolled during something I went and saw, but I don't remember it at all.
It's wonky to look at, man. It looks like a weird movie, but also that's the draw, right? Because you're watching something that you haven't seen before, and
Yeah.
I don't know if a lot of these studios are going to listen because I mean, like bringing up like Disney, like they're just so accustomed to that formula, right? Like, I mean,
Mhm.
when was the last time outside of maybe some of the Pixar movies that Disney has developed like new IP?
Yeah, no, yeah, and it's always drawn from like source material or like because they have so much original content, and that goes back in like into the encompassing conversation of everything we're talking about. With like what you said and what we were talking about before we started recording was like they're trying to remake everything live action that they can that they have an animated warehouse for, essentially. Lions King, Aladdin, Little Mermaid. I think Snow White is their next one.
Yeah,
But I get
yeah.
it. They make money, but I
Kind
don't
of though. I
know,
mean, like you
you
said,
know?
they've been tanking though. This past year, I think it showed that they're not really making money. When you
Yeah.
have Marvel movies underperforming, when you have, I think there was there was like some, it was kind of like a Disney original princess kind of thing. Maybe there was one that came out this past year. Wish, I think it was, wasn't
Wish,
it?
yeah, that one we talked
Yeah,
about. Yeah, that
that
just
one,
did
yeah.
awful.
And it tanked. But
Yeah.
you know what? I don't even consider it like original content because you're just playing into freaking the same freaking plot again, man. It's like some
Yeah.
princess and they're, like they're overcoming something and at the end it's like kind of the happy, formulaic ending of just like, everything happily ever after kind of deal. And it's just like
Yeah.
what you're going to get with a Disney movie. And I guess what I mean by new IP is like I don't think they're branching out and making like new intellectual properties that are different, right? Like something that's going to kind of garner a response that's like, wow, we haven't seen something like that from Disney in a while. But
Yeah.
even other studios too, man. Like, I mean, like I think were we talking about this last podcast? I think they're making like a Twister remake or
No, yeah, they're
sequel.
doing a sequel. Yeah.
Yeah, which is like I don't think that's necessary. I just don't see the point in it. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
it's like when you're going through your filmography and you're like, yeah, let's make a Twister sequel. That's telling me you're running out of ideas.
Yeah.
And you're kind of panicking at this point. And I think the answer's there, like you said. It's like, you just need to look at A24. You need to look at all these other, international markets and see all the content that they're putting out and kind of just come to this conclusion like, yeah, we need to start developing new intellectual properties. I just know that's a risk for them. And maybe, I mean, do
Yeah.
you think that's like the biggest variable is just the risk component of developing something new?
Well, I think it just depends. Like one of Marvel's strongest attributes or Disney's really was taking somebody and then making them famous. You know what I mean? But they would always still have like these intense budgets, even though they're paying people pennies on like their star list. You know what I
Mm.
mean? Like Chris Evans, he was pretty successful. I mean, he was freaking Human Torch. I knew who he was before Captain
Yeah.
America. Everybody knew who Robert Downey Jr. was before. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Scarlett Johansson, Mark Ruffalo, like those are poor examples. But then you have other great examples of people who have like turned into stars overnight. You know what I mean? But then at the same time, you look at these things, they still have 80, $100 million budgets, 120, $250 million budgets, right? So I think you hit the nail on the head. I think what it is like other countries can give $3, $4, $5 million to somebody in their currency converted. It might be a lot less in USD. So comparatively could be technically half the budget after conversion. And then they make something wonderful like Villainous. Like I can't go on about how great that movie is all the time. But then I have to see how much the budget was for this. Because one of my favorite one of my favorite female led or just really action movies in general is like Atomic Blonde was made on a budget of $30 million and it grossed
Oh, I love
100
that
million.
movie.
Yeah, I love that movie so much. It's one of my favorite of all time in that category in action. And it's just it still could have been done less and gotten the same result in a lot of other places. You know what I'm saying? Like our budgets are just so much more astronomically higher. Like whenever it comes to how do you say it? Star power. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's very easy for Robert Downey Jr. to say, "Hey, I need $25 million." You know what
Mhm.
I mean? Like it's just super, super, super easy to say that to somebody. Um, I actually can't find the budget at all for Villainous, but if I can't find it, I'd have to assume it was next to nothing. So,
Well, I mean, like, but you
yeah,
brought up like Atomic Blonde. I mean, is that you said 30 million? Was that USD? And
yeah,
was
that
that
was USD
produced
for
here? That was
total.
which studio was that?
Pretty sure that was Universal.
Universal. But see, I mean, like that's a good example to me of like, I mean, you have like original content, right? And it's
Mhm.
not. There are plenty of like action movies with female protagonists, right?
Yeah,
Like, but the thing that Atomic Blonde did differently, it just the story and the way everything kind of
the
wrapped up at the
style.
end, the
Yeah,
style, like it was just all unique. And you know, when that movie rolls, you're kind of like, I have not seen a female-led action movie like this before in
yeah.
quite some time.
Mhm.
And I don't think that studios are recognizing that that's what people want. You know what I mean? Technically speaking, I heard someone say this on I think it was on a Reddit or a screenwriting Reddit or something of that sort. Every story's been done before,
Yeah,
right? When you come to think about it, you know what I mean? Like every theme has been explored, every story has been practically done before.
yeah,
What makes yours unique is just kind of like your ability to kind of bring your own creative and like your vision to the screen pretty much.
yeah.
And
In
I
your
think this
style, yeah.
your style and your vision, that's what's going to make it unique. Like we just did an ISS review earlier. um that film could have tanked. It's a cool premise, right? But it could
Yeah,
have tanked if it didn't have that kind of claustrophobic style, right? Where it was
yeah.
just focused on the characters. If it
Mhm.
was some big budget, like ISS, with like explosions and stuff, it may not have been as successful. But
Yeah,
because people are bringing in original content and bringing in their interpretation of it to the screen, it's more likely to be successful. So, um, yeah, man, I'm hoping that they learn from kind of the way these international markets are doing things. And like you said, I don't know. Do you see that happening in international markets though? Do you see them turning kind of into Hollywood the bigger that they get? So when you have movies like Parasite and there's been quite a few from South Korea recently, in particular. I mean, Squid Games made them a crap load of money.
yeah.
Like,
That and that movie that Will shouted out from A24 on his best of,
oh, Past Lives.
Past Lives.
Yeah,
Yep.
Past Lives. I mean, they've been killing it lately. I mean, do you see that
Yeah.
happening in other markets, like where it become kind of Hollywoodized, I guess I could say, for lack of a better
I
term,
mean,
because of how successful they're getting?
I guess it depends because also once like I mean, a lot of people know this, but I think it just takes some reminding. Is Bollywood, India, is the biggest movie market in the world. You know, like we're not even really a close second for their volume of movies that they pump out. You know,
Mhm.
and even if you go on your AMC app and check like what's showing, if you scroll to the way bottom, there's at least 6 or 7 Bollywood movies that you can catch over here, right? And I've heard good things about like that movie Animal that came out of Bollywood. It's like
Mhm.
3.5 hours long. I've heard great things about that movie. Unfortunately, that's not a market or I wouldn't even call it a genre, but a market's movie base that I've really dived into quite yet. But they pump it out. They do cheap things. They do like they even did like a complete Exorcist ripoff, like word for
Oh
word
god.
at one point, like from the 70s. You know what I mean? So like they have a really good way over there of producing their own big budget movies and then having so much more smaller like indie appreciation, right? Now
Mhm.
there's a lot more people there's a lot of people in India, right?
Yeah.
Especially comparatively to over here for us. But I mean, they're always taking chances. They're putting like cameras in filmmakers' hands, letting them like experience their vision. Now, I don't know like the status of their market outside of that. I just know that they're miles ahead of us in terms of like relative output,
Yeah.
and everything like that. Like they're the number one movie market in the world. as much as we may or may not consume it on a basis. I mean, that'd be really cool to see something like out of there, like get like Parasite status. You know what I
Well,
mean?
I mean, they had that movie last year. Was it last year? The RRR movie? Did
You're
you ever
right.
watch
That's
that
the
one
one I
movie?
keep trying to think of. RRR. I heard
Dude, did you
great
watch
things
it?
about that. No, I
Oh,
think you
dude,
told me to
it's
watch it. I
so
heard it's
frick.
so
I've
good.
watched it 3 times, bro, and it's 3 hours
Yeah.
long, but it is so freaking fun, bro. It is like
Yeah.
one of the funnest movies I've seen in years, and it's so over the
Really.
top. Like, yeah, I mean, it's ridiculously over the top. I mean, but it knows what it is, and
Yeah.
it can go from like action to like musical all of a sudden to like
Yeah.
freaking just like these bonkers crazy scenes, man. But it's so Steven Spielberg saw it actually, and he actually did like a shout out to the director just because he's like I've never seen anything like this in the past like decade.
Yeah.
It's a really really good movie, dude. It's
And
really
it won
solid, and
awards, right?
I think
Didn't
it
it get some
won.
recognition?
Yeah, I think there's a song in there that they cut to, and I think that won like an award.
Nice.
And
Okay.
I think it won an award for something else. I don't remember, but yeah, I mean, like, I don't know. I want to see the budget of that movie because that budget is I mean, that movie is 3 hours long.
Yeah.
And I think let me see the budget for it was. It's not translating to USD, but it is the most expensive in like movie from India that's ever been made. That's
Oh,
for
really?
sure. Yeah, like it's like a
Interesting.
ridiculously big budget. But I mean, to be honest though, man, I think the important like lesson from that movie though is kind of like what you said. It's like you're taking a risk on something, even if it is a bigger than what we usually, like in India, maybe they're used to kind of smaller budgets, but they put all this money into this movie because they wanted to take that risk. It was something original, it was something different, and they let it happen. And then I mean, the award paid off at the end of it. I
Yeah.
don't know. I heard they're maybe doing like a sequel or maybe working with the same team again on another movie, but yeah, dude, it's just you don't see that here. Like you don't see movies like RRR or even like Parasite. Keep bringing up Parasite, but like you don't see movies like that being made here that can get a little bit of a bigger budget with a very unique idea.
Yeah.
Because studios are kind of
Hesitant about crowds
yeah, and some of
and
it, I mean,
reception.
some of it is kind of like what you brought up. People are not going out, which is another reason I think that people have shifted towards kind of international media because they are at home and they're on Tubi, right? And they're just like street going through the library and they're like all these different movies and like let me just watch it, which
Yeah.
is cool. I would say that's the cool part of streaming is like it has exposed people to a lot of different content. There's a lot of different movies I would have never been able to see without streaming.
Yeah.
But we're just in this weird time right now where it's like, is streaming dominance versus theatrical dominance, and how do you kind of balance those two out? And then when you're bringing in new IPs into this market where people don't know what's going to happen, I think
Mhm.
that's the problem. But I think at the end of the day, I could be wrong, but I mean, they probably need to just pull the trigger and just start working on new IPs and take the risk. Otherwise,
Yeah.
you're gonna lose money just like Disney did all last year.
Yeah, exactly. No, and I actually converted that. That's converted to $66 million if I did the conversion right through
For
Google for RRR.
66 million?
Yeah, that's their
Dude,
most
that
expensive
movie,
movie.
bro, like if you watch it, that movie, like to me, it's if that was made here in the US, I'd say that was probably like 150, $200 million movie.
Really?
Yeah. Like it's
That's
just
crazy.
bonkers some of the stuff they
Yeah.
do in it. It's nuts.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, like to go to that point, like also like since I have gone into like a lot of giallo, Italian horror, stuff like anything in between, really. The thing I've noticed is like whenever I go and look up the budgets of some of these and it's like $1 million converted and stuff like that, I was like, how did they do that? Like, shout out Lucio Fulci. Like that dude is just like great at practical effects, right?
Mhm.
And so the thing is like it's no different than whenever you look at some of these movies that like producers have started slashing their budgets mid-roll, you know what I mean,
Mhm.
mid-production and everything like that. And then now they come out with something even better because now they have a tenth of the budget that they just had because the producer just came on set and just slashed it all. So then you get all these creative minds that find new ways and really help evolve cinema in general
Yeah.
because they're finding cheaper ways to do it. So I guess that's one of the reasons it confuses me. I'd have to assume that it really just comes down to labor and just the star power that some of these people are getting on these budgets. But even then, like ISS, which I know we talked about a couple of times already, I mean, I didn't really have any star power outside of West Side Stories. I forget her name. One of the lead actresses from there. She was in one of the stars in West Side Story. She was like one of the main stars. And so, unless she got a big majority of that budget, there wasn't enough CGI to warrant a $13.6 million budget. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's got to be ways to like cut things down, because if RRR can come out and be $66 million converted, if I did it right, that's just wild. You know what I mean? Then Godzilla's been the talk of the cinema world lately with its budget and stuff like that. I think people sleep on Shin Godzilla because that movie had a similar budget and had a lot more CGI going on in it.
What was the budget on that one?
Same, under 15. Yeah, under $15 million converted. And that's the one where like Godzilla's got like the quad mouth where it opens up in like 4 sections like that.
Oh yeah,
You know what I'm talking about?
That movie, yeah.
Yeah, so that one had under 15 million. It's just that they have a craft that they're doing over there. They're able to articulate it. They're able to sit down. And I don't know if we talked about it here, but like a good way of doing it, right, would be it has to come down to like creative freedom at that point and less studio interference, which we can feel in movies whenever we see them.
Oh, yeah.
Cookie cutter studio interference base and versus something that has creative control. I wanted to shout out a movie, My Bloody Valentine, which has gotten a huge cult status and second win lately.
I love that movie.
Yeah, so I watched the original one. I went and bought the Scream Factory release, and then I watched the 2009 one. And there's a lot. It's an actual collector's edition. It's got a lot of behind-the-scenes footage on that Scream Factory release. And so one of the things they were talking about is like they started filming it midsummer, and it was like a 4 to 6 week shoot. And they all had a blast, this and that. But the MPAA had them cut it 9 different times. So they were only able to get the prints and theatrical prints in very shortly before the air date, because Valentine's Day, they wanted it in before Valentine's Day. But in other countries, like what was it? COVID delayed Godzilla -1. I believe the script was ready for years. Like, what was it? 2018, if I did my research right.
Oh wow.
It was 2018-19. He started the director started writing the script, started doing this, doing that. Essentially where I'm getting is like it just came out the end of 2023. That movie marinated for years. You know what I mean? Like a good comparison is like when things aren't rushed and you have like, I know we're talking about movies, but a good comparison would be like an indie game developer that spends 3 or 4 years making their own game, and then you get massive quality. The graphics look good, the story's good, the plot's good, because they aren't rushed. They're their own boss at that point doing this. I think it really comes down to being under the scrutiny of certain studios. And, I get it. Universal, you've been around for a while. Paramount, you've been around for a while. You I wouldn't say you know what you're doing, because sometimes I question these places, but they've had a formula and they've shown success with the way that they want things done, right? So I can't necessarily question it, and they're not always going to call the shots right. But I think that's ultimately what it comes down to, is like I can feel the labor of love, in Godzilla -1 and Parasite and The Villainous. Based on the word of mouth I've heard on RRR and past lives and stuff like that. Squid Games, stuff like that. They just pick up the rights, and I'd have to assume they just say, let us know when it's ready to drop. And then, you know what I mean? Because I doubt they expected it to be a huge hit. They just a dump and go, as I like to call it. So I guess it really just depends. And especially the way that streaming has really augmented the way that we consume things as well. Right. Like even I'm guilty of this. I'll passively watch some movies on my remote days from work whenever I'm here, like right here, my TV's right there. And then the way it's positioned, I can fill out a report and watch something at the same time. You know what I mean? So if it's a TV show, I'll have it playing in the background, tune into it, do this, do that. And that's not how I always consume things. But I think it really just comes down to that. Just so many different layers. It's like an onion. You know what I mean?
Yeah, dude. It's not just one thing, right? And I mean, the budget thing you said was interesting. It's just kind of like, especially horror movies, right? With like the smaller budgets, how they're able to squeeze more out of it. Yeah. And I think interesting, I'm going to plug in Nolan right now just because, but it wasn't Nolan. I think it was one of the producers on one of his films. He was talking about how like on his sets, at least, like all the money goes in front of the camera, and like everything behind the camera, it's like, for lack of a better term, it's like ghetto as hell. Like there isn't like he said like there's no monitor village. He said that there isn't place like for the actors to see with like a tent and like like sprinkler systems if it's hot and like like people getting food catered and all that. He's like it's literally all the money is in front of the camera. And I think that like what you said, like with star power too, it's like no, it's like you can't do that. I think at this point with where we're at in the state of cinema, you can't just throw someone like Johnny Depp. I remember he did that Pirates movie. He got like $50 million, which is freaking bonkers to me, man. That's like a third of your budget, a fourth of your budget on one person. Like we're just not in the state of cinema where you could do that anymore. And I think it is better because you and I were talking about 2001 a few weeks back. You were telling me about some of the stuff Kubrick had to do kind of to, with the budget he had and the constraints he had. But
with the paint
that film
and
looks,
everything.
that film looks freaking phenomenal. It looks incredible. But I think people are able to squeeze out more from, kind of these smaller budgets. Like you start looking at more practical effects. You start looking at ways like, how can I do this? How can I do that? Bring up Oppenheimer again. All that stuff in that movie was all practical. You know what I mean? The particles whizzing, the explosion, like everything. And it's like, if movies kind of dived into that and focused in on like how can we kind of progress cinema forward with like practical effects and lowering the budgets, I think that we would maybe get more IPs that are more like kind of in different. But right now, the only thing that seems to be quote unquote working for them with their formula is just re-releases and remakes. Which sucks.
Prequels.
Dude, prequel. Do we even talk about prequels? I don't know if that's a whole other.
Because it just depends on how it's done. Like I saw a report where they're trying to make a Die Hard prequel. Why?
Really?
Yeah, it was just some random YouTube thing. I ended up watching like 5 minutes of it. Dude quoted, I wish I could give him credit for, I don't remember where it was. But yeah, it was just a quick thumbnail, some guy, and then he was talking about how they're contemplating making a Die Hard prequel. It's like, why?
Who needs
At that point, just make a whole original IP because there's no need for that.
Well, I mean, that takes away from like the original, right? Because the thing that made the original so great is like you just have this standard street cop, right? That's like thrown in this crazy situation. And that's what makes the first one so unique. So like, what are you going to do that's going to top that? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
It doesn't make any sense. And I think they tried to do that, bringing Disney back into the fold. They were trying to do that with Chris Pratt, weren't they? With like Indiana Jones, they were trying to do like a younger Indiana Jones.
I did hear about that. They're just trying to cast him in anything and everything. He'll say yes to, it feels like. Because I keep hearing Chris Pratt like attached to everything, man. Yeah.
He's a good dude, though. I do like Chris Pratt. He's like a really nice guy. But yeah, I feel like he does kind of agree to everything that's thrown at him.
He's like the more modern age Sam Jackson, because that dude's been in like almost 200 movies, dude. Like,
I think he didn't. Doesn't he like hold a record for like the most movies or something like that? I remember reading something along those lines that Sam Jackson's just been in so many fucking movies. He like held some record or something like that. But because he'll take a movie even if he's just in it for like 10 minutes.
Yeah,
and he's a big name too. But I mean, it's like you want to be in this movie for 10 minutes, he'll be like, sure, I don't care.
241 movies, man.
Are you serious, man?
Yeah, I wish I could.
Jackson, dude. He's such a cool dude.
Yeah, dude. And he's like in his 70s, man.
Yeah, bro. He's up and he has so much energy. I always joke with I'm like, I wish I had that much energy when I'm freaking in my 70s, dude.
Yeah.
He's just, but you know what? And to bring it down to another variable, we're talking about star power. Shout out to Sam Jackson because I think he actually does. Like I just said, he'll take, even if it's a small time role, you know what I mean? Or like a movie that's like not even like a big budget. Sometimes you'll be like, oh, there's Sam Jackson. And it's like, you need more actors that are willing to do something like that. Not just, because he could easily be like, I need, $10 million for this movie because I'm Sam Jackson.
Easily.
But
even for 10 seconds of time.
Yeah, but he doesn't do that. I think he's like super, he really cares about cinema and the movies that he's in. And he just wants to in a good movie or a different movie. And I think that's why, he's at 200 something movies right now. That's crazy.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, because he's one of my favorite actors, man. I just love him and everything. Pulp Fiction. What was it? He had a very minor role in this movie that I watched called Death by Temptation, which is about like a succubus. It's a trauma movie, but yeah, he plays like a preacher. And he's got like maybe like 4 minutes of screen time, but he's just
what year is that movie?
91, I want to say.
Okay.
Yeah, it's about this. We did it for the watch party on the Discord. It was me and Bloody, and we were watching it, but it's about this girl that'll go to a bar and just seduce people and then just bring them home and kill them. Like, that's
That's
the whole
pretty.
point of the movie. Dude, it was actually really good. It had a really good plot to it. Some of the cinematography in that was absolutely insane. And it's a low budget movie, but yeah, it's just like I find myself, instead of looking for modern movies, and it's not like I do not in any way fall in that camp of like modern movies are bad or modern music
Mhm.
is bad, right? It's just there's so much that's already been out. I can much more easily go and find something readily available on like Tubi, Peacock,
Yeah.
Pluto, anything from like the 1980s, like Dario
Mhm.
Argento, Mario Bava, Lamberto Bava, Fulci, like stuff like that I'm into. Like, man, have you ever gotten into giallo? I've never asked you that. You would love
No.
that
I
genre,
mean,
dude.
I'd be interested in doing it. I mean, like I said, I've been on my binge of like Japanese movies, Japanese horror movies lately, but I'd love to get
Yeah.
into some Italian horror.
So I'll sell people on it. I know a lot of people that do listen are into that, but like so I always like to categorize when it comes to horror because it's not necessarily horror. I would categorize it's more thriller. It has horror elements in
Okay.
giallo. So like I like to categorize at the time that giallo became more prevalent because Argento is considered like the godfather of giallo. But the thing is like in horror from the 70s onwards became all about like naked women, gore, and scary killer, with a
Mhm.
cool mask, this or that, right? Giallo is all about a genuine story, right? I am actually pretty hard pressed. I know some of it exists out there, but Argento doesn't have a lot of naked women in like his Giallo, right?
Mm.
And it's all about the uniqueness of it. Like one of my favorite ones is opera, and so it's not really a play of Phantom of the Opera, but what it is like so he'll get the actress right, and then like tie her down, and he does this every time that he kills somebody. And this is his more like I guess you could say slasher oriented one rather than a big like thriller based buildup. But he'll put these needles in her eyelids so that anytime that she like pulls her eyelids down, like it'll stab her in the eyelids, so she has to watch him do everything.
Oh,
You know what
wow.
I'm saying? So
Clockwork
like
Orange kind of shit.
yeah, exactly. So it's very unique and very different. And he never copies the same tropes. Then you have like Bird with the Crystal Plumage, which you'd love. You have Four Flies on Grey Velvet, which has amazing cinematography. Some of the strongest last like minute of a movie I've ever seen is in that movie. But it's things like that. Like there's just such a golden era for that time of things that like I just never got to consume. So that's what I've been on. Like I was watching Zombie 3 right before we started rolling because I only seen 1 and 2, and that's a Fulci movie, and it's good. He's just known for practical effects, and that's what I like. You know what I mean? Seeing like how things get done and this and that. And I just wish we would have more of like less reliance on CGI
Yeah.
and more practical. Like whenever it comes to 2001, the paint scenes and stuff like that, like the going into the monolith and stuff like that. Like it's just so cool to find out how they do things afterwards, especially that's why I like physical media with the special features and everything like
Mhm.
that. Just finding out how they did it, how they crunched the budget, how they did this, how they got all on hands and did this. Like,
And we're
man,
lazy
it's
now
wild.
too, man. I mean, like when you think about it, like when you think about, like you said, 2001 or movies like say 80s and 70s, it's like, they're shooting on film too. So it's like,
Mhm.
it's like, it's a risk. I mean, you can go through a whole reel, try to do something practically, and then, do the dailies the next day and look at it and be like, that looks like crap.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
exactly.
And
Yeah.
like now we're shooting on digital, and people can't even when we're shooting on digital, people can't take the risk of doing something practically. You could see right then and there what it looks like in frame, and people
Yeah.
still aren't doing it, which is mind-boggling to me.
Yeah.
So I'll check that out. Throw me. I mean, we're doing that segment, man. With I'll watch
Oh
this
yeah,
if you
that
watch that segment. I know we have like,
I'm stoked to see what your thoughts are on that movie. I threw your way here soon.
yeah, I had to take a few days to process that movie because you guys throw me some quirky shit, man. I'm like, what are you guys watching? I mean, like, but yeah, I want to save it for that episode because I had to.
Yeah.
It wasn't like Tokyo Gore Police for sure, where it was like,
It's the actual story and everything.
yeah, there's actual story there. So I had to
Yeah.
kind of sit there and process it for a little bit. But I mean, I think at the end of the day, kind of like what we're saying, guys, it's just
Yeah.
there's a lot of good movies. I think Chase made a really good point where it's like, you can't say there are no good movies right now
No,
because
not at all.
there are tons of good movies that you just have to, make your way to see. You have to kind of step out of your comfort zone a little bit and expose yourself
Take
to something
risks.
different. Yeah, take risks and listen to people's feedback too. Join communities, and you'll hear people talk about really cool movies. And um, if I never, honestly, dude, I mean, when I first started collecting Blu-rays, I was just so my mind was just on mainstream titles. Like, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I had never even thought about, you know, venturing out into like international markets, or like Kurosawa was one of my favorite directors of all time now. And I'd never
Yeah.
seen any of his movies just because I was so focused on mainstream titles when I was growing up.
Yeah.
But over time, I mean, the more you kind of expose yourself to these movies or these international markets, you just want more.
Mm-hmm.
I'm on Tubi now, man, and it's just like, you know, the next recommended movie, I'm like, hit play, hit play, hit
Yeah.
play, and I don't
Yeah.
even know who directed it or what it is, but you know, it's just cool to see something different, and I think that we are thankfully in a good era right now with, I mean, the good part of streaming where, you know, you could expose yourself to a lot of good movies
Yeah.
for free sometimes, and you know, we should be thankful for that and taking advantage of that, you know, the best we can.
Yeah, absolutely. Shout out Tubi, the deity in the sky.
Tubi, I
that
know we
provides us with
always
free-
we always we need
Yeah.
to like get them as a sponsor or something, because like every freaking episode we talk about Tubi.
Man, I wish I could support them financially somehow.
Isn't
Like at
there? I
least
thought
with
there
my,
was like an ad. Isn't there like an ad free? No,
Nope.
really?
There's no way to support
How
them.
does that work, dude? How do they make enough money? Like seriously, I don't know the business. It's kind of like streaming. We don't know the business aspects of it, right?
Yeah.
Actors. I mean, that was what the whole strike was about. But it's like I don't understand how they're making money off of no paid memberships and just ads, because there's
Even if
not
I
a
could
lot
pay
of ads
$5.
either.
No, it's not. They're short, like 30. There's
30
times I get
seconds.
up, take a bathroom break, and I come back like, dude, what? I literally sprinted
Yeah.
and came back, and you're already
And it's
back on.
sometimes like maybe 2 or 3 during a, you know, 2-hour movie, which is not bad at all, at all.
Mm-mm.
Like it's like I don't understand how they're making a profit. And I'm with you. If they had some membership where it's like $5, I'd support them just because of how many cool movies they have on there.
Yep, exactly. But I respect them. You know, free is free. You know, so
Yeah, I'm
they've
good with
always been. Yeah,
I'm
and
good
maybe
with
2
free.
minutes total of ads. So
Yeah.
thank you
Tubi, if
guys.
you're listening, like, you
Yeah,
know,
they need to tag them.
let us sponsor you, #Tubi, because we're using your app all the time.
Yeah, we're funding them single handedly almost at this point.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, guys, so I know we jumped a little bit all over the place about remakes. We just only really got into remakes about like, because we really wanted to tie into where we felt like the international appeal became in a watered down market. So we wanted to thank you guys for tuning in about our talk about remakes, international appeal, and really, I guess you could say this was even a really part 2 of the state of cinema at this point,
Yeah.
you know? Just because there's so much to talk about and things have been changing so much, you know, like we live in a very fast-paced world nowadays. It's changed a lot over the last 10, 15 years. So what we consumed last year is going to be changing going into 2024. So thank you guys so much for tuning in on our will-less episode.
I know, right?
Gabe.
That sucks. Maybe
And
we need to do like kind of a part 2 of this just to see Will's thoughts on it as well, just because I know Will's
Yeah.
probably listening to this. He's like, how did they not bring this up?
Yeah. We did this one off the dome for the most part, and I feel like we did well on that. So let us know. And also, I kind of wanted to start throwing this off. Let us know in the comments some recommendations. If there's something you want us to talk about, anything like that, throw down in the comments what you would like to see us talk about. Of course, we usually plan what we're going to talk about, usually for a few weeks, sometimes a month out in advance. But sometimes, I mean, we've seen it on the Discord, people ask us what we want to talk about, and we do it. And we love to entertain you guys. So throw it out there. Let us know in the comments below what you want to hear us talk about next.
Yeah, and we appreciate all the support, guys. As always, like, subscribe, comment down below, and we will check you guys out next week for the next episode.
Later, everybody.
See you.